Welcome to an all-new episode of SJHL Insider, whether you be watching on the YouTube or listening on wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. I think those are the only two. Thanks so much for tuning in. We have a great show, as always planned. We'll get you set for the upcoming weekend in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. A bit of a quieter weekend in the SJHL, but we'll get into that and much, much more. And I'm being told by Clark, who we'll bring in a second. Don't bring him in just yet. But I'm being told some background. Clark planned most of the show today. So kudos to Clark. But we have a special guest today, and he won't tell me who it is. So we'll get into that and much, much more. Before we do, though, big shout out to all of our sponsors here at SJHL Insider. Of course, UPL is our presenting sponsor for all of our shows. Thanks, UPL. You're awesome. And, of course, all of our other great sponsors are awesome, too. Borgo, Cantera Seeds, Capital Automall, Chevrolet, Great Western, Nutrien, RBC, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Sask Lotteries, Tourism Saskatchewan, UPL, Sask Energy, SGEU, SGI. Thanks so much for your support. Without your support, these shows are not possible. So thank you so much. Now we can bring in Clark. We say hello, Clark. How are we?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Busy start to the week.
Yes.
Lots of news.
Yes, I would agree.
Lots of news to start the week in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. Of course, we talked about it on Monday, but return of Game of the Month. Very exciting. That's
Shout out
next
SaskTel.
week. I mean, that's only 8 days away.
Yes.
Quick turnaround for the Game of the Month. But very exciting stuff. Been a busy week. But I'll let you get into your favorite part of the show.
Yeah, it has been a busy week, so let's get this busy show underway with the hat trick.
There's your hats. All right, let's recap Tuesday and Wednesday.
Let's do it.
Let's recap Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday, just the one game on the schedule, but a pretty entertaining game at the EPA between the Humboldt Broncos and the Yorkton Terriers. Humboldt was up 4-1. Yorkton clawed their way back, made it 4-4 going into the third. Humboldt responds with 3 third-period goals. They win 7-4. And then a trio of games Wednesday night, a.k.a. last night. The Nipawin Hawks, a commanding 6-1 win over the Weyburn Red Wings. Flin Flon shuts out Larange 1-0. And Melfort shutting out Estevan 4-0. And, of course, all of our look-backs this season are presented by our good friends at Sask Lotteries. Let's start, Clark. I think for me, the game I really want to talk about out of those four and kind of where I'd like to focus the chat on is Nipawin and Weyburn. And because the reason why I think that matchup was so interesting, and I was actually pleasantly surprised, very surprised, I should say, that it was as one-sided as it was. But it's because both teams had over a week off.
I was going to say.
So both teams were very fresh going into that game. And, of course, that's one storyline. But another massive storyline was the debut of Liam McInnes with his new team, the Nipawin Hawks. And he showed up in a big way. A goal and 3 assists. This could be a huge addition for the Hawks.
Well, yeah, and we saw the Hawks make a bit of I'm going to call it a monumental shift on their roster with the trades
That's a fair assessment.
Joel Mabin, who has been a very, I'll say important piece to that roster, that top 6 forward group in Nipawin for a couple years now, shipping him to Melville, where, again, we'll get into this another time probably, but I think he's going to play a nice role in Melville. I think they're going to really like him there. But Liam McInnes coming in to kind of not only shore up that defensive group, that blue line core, but also, again, we talk about Nipawin's offensive abilities, adding to their offensive abilities. The guy's over a point per game as a defenseman, and he's all of a sudden fitting like a glove there. And this could be a sign of things to come. And I guess we'll see kind of if that continues going forward.
Well, and the other thing too is he obviously comes in at a really good time because the Hawks are going to be without Ronan Buckberger for now until the Christmas break because he's away at for Team Canada West at the World Junior A Challenge. And obviously, congratulations to Ronan and, of course, Matthew Van Blaricom, Scott Barney and company representing Team Canada West at the World Junior A Challenge. But yeah, like for Liam McInnes to come in and a goal and 3 assists in his debut with the Nipawin Hawks. And for Tad Kozun too, I was going through their roster actually this morning. And obviously when they acquired Liam McInnes on Saturday, this past Saturday. And as a result, they had 9 20-year-olds. And that's what resulted in the Joel Maben move to Melville. But you look at the group of 20-year-olds that they had, that was an extremely tough decision. And I listened to the interview that our good friend Clark Stork did with Tad Kozun, and even Tad said, he's like, this is literally nothing against any of the players we traded away in the McInnes deal or even the Joel Maben deal. It's, sometimes you just get caught up, obviously, in the numbers. And, Joel Maben's going to be, I agree with you. I think he's going to be a really good fit for the Melville Millionaires. And for Joel Maben, he's going to go and play for a coach that he's familiar with, and Doug Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's maybe a little bit of an underrated storyline there. And Joel Maben, we're going back to the beginning of the season, or earlier this season, I should say, when we did our fantasy draft. Like, he was right up there in the conversation for those selections, and for him to now be in a point where he's going to go to a Melville team that has been scoring by committee this year for sure, but he's going to slot right in, no problem in that top 6, probably the top line, I would think. I mean, I don't know how they're going to work it out. We'll figure that out as we go, but I think he's going to he's going to fit right in and be able to contribute immediately to that Melville team. That I don't think that they're like overly worried about their goal scoring in Melville, but I don't think that they would complain about getting a little bit more. They are the lowest scoring team in the league currently in terms of goals for. So a little spark there could go a long way. 6
goals, 11 assists on the season for Joel Maben in 26 games. So 17 points in 26 games for Joel Maben. Last year, of course, he had 41 with the Nipawin Hawks. So right now on pace for, I think, slightly less than 41. But I mean, even adding somebody with the experience that Joel Maben has to their lineup, that should be a good boost. I just finally conclude off your point of where he's going to slot into the Melville Millionaires lineup. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait until Saturday when the Melville Millionaires take on the Humboldt Broncos. All right, let's move on to point 2 of the hat trick, and that being the standings in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League since the last time we checked in. Here they are up on the board, and one thing, here's the thing we check in with the standings each and every week, and that's because obviously right now it's just so fascinating when you look at the standings. But the one thing that really stands out, obviously, is 5 through 9 and how tight it is. I would like to say, with Flin Flon's win last night, that the first team to 50 points. 50 points in 27 games. So that's 50 out of a possible 54. Not too shabby.
Yep.
Not too shabby. But you know what's really interesting, and this is a race that's starting to shape form, and one we really haven't talked about much. Look at 2, 3, and 4. Battleford's, Humboldt, and Melfort. They're only separated by 3 points right now, and that's starting to become interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are the teams that we've talked about for a lot of the year as once they find their footing, they're going to be super, super dangerous. Obviously, Battleford's has been winning a ton in the last couple months. We've talked about that a lot in the recent episodes. We saw Melfort kind of go through a very 500-ish stretch there, and Humboldt had a kind of up and down November as well. So once we see those teams kind of find that grasp onto that identity that they had early on in the season, I think you're going to see that group of 3 be so competitive. And you want to be that number 2 team, because if you're battling, I'm not counting out Flin Flon in terms of teams that could catch Flin Flon, but you want to be that number 2 team, because come playoff time, that's an extra round of home ice advantage as well. So you want to get to that number 2 spot. It's going to be a battle all year long.
So I just want to point out that there is a mistake in this standings graphic. The Nipawin Hawks and Kindersley Clippers should be flip-flopped.
Yeah.
Nipawin's in 5th. And Kindersley's in 6th. Like, those records are proper. Nipawin is 14-13,
there we go.
0-1, and Kindersley is 12-11, 2-2.
Good eye.
So there is a little bit of a mistake in that SJHL standings graphic. If you are watching on the YouTube, if not, don't worry about it. But yeah, it is starting to become interesting. And obviously, I think too, you see Melville, Weyburn, Estevan all down there, 7, 8, 9. And the interesting, obviously, all 3 of those teams in the Viterra division. But,
yes.
when you look at Weyburn and Melville, if you're a fan of either of those teams, to me, I wouldn't be as too worried just yet because you are the two teams who have played the least amount of games in the SJHL. I mean, Estevan's only played one more game, but for all three of those teams, you have games in hand that you can make up with against the Nipawin Hawks and the Kindersley Clippers. Obviously, Nipawin and Kindersley have played a few more games than those two teams. But as time and time again, as we've talked about, it's one thing to have games in hand. It's another thing to actually earn points and take advantage of those games in hand.
Yeah, you have to. And, obviously there's still, what are we looking at here? 30 some games left for most of these teams. So there is time to do that. But like you said, games in hand only matter if you get points in those games in hand. So eventually those schedules are going to balance out. Those games played are going to balance out. And I think right now you just kind of have to look at the trends on how these teams are playing. Again, Weyburn's 3-6-0-1 in their last 10. Melville's 4-6 in their last 10. So
Estevan's 4-6 too.
Estevan also exactly. They've lost their last 2. So there's you got to start seeing some a little bit more positive trending stuff coming from these teams, and then I think those fan bases are going to feel a little less worried about where they're currently at in the standings. But like I said, there's still 30, 33, 34 games for some of these teams. So there's a long way to go in that regard for them to find that footing.
And I don't think anything's going to change prior to Christmas when it comes to any separation in the SJHL standings. But what we will say is it will make the last couple of months of the season very fascinating when it comes, especially for those last couple of playoff spots. And even from 5 through 9, obviously right now, separated by 5 points in the SJHL standings. All right, the final point of the hat trick today. We usually like to, in the final point of the hat trick, look at a certain stat or a certain sector, I guess, of the stats. And today we are looking at the top 10 scoring among defensemen in the SJHL. Here is your top 10 if you are watching on the YouTubes. Obviously, Noah Houle got off to such a good start this season with the Flin Flon Bombers really racking up the points early on in the season. And now after that, you're kind of seeing, 2 through 10 is only separated by 6 points. And, one thing I know we had talked about a little bit on SJHL Weekly is the amount of players that are kind of hovering around that point per game mark. And that really stands out because you're seeing a lot of players. Obviously, Noah Houle's well above a point per game. Tanner Gold's just above a point per game. Chase Freetmore is a point per game. Same with Felix Allard. And there's a bunch of players that are like Alex Isaac, Connor Toohier, they're 0.96 points per game. There's a lot of players that are hovering around that mark. But, since the last time we've seen this, Clark, obviously we've seen some players move up. I think the obvious ones, and I know we had talked about them last week, so I don't want to dive too much into them, but the players on the North Stars have really obviously climbed up the rankings. You see Tanner Gold quietly in second place when it comes to defenseman scoring. But for me, what really stands out is the 2 rookies, or 3 rookies with Connor Toohier as well. But the younger rookies, I should say, in Carson Olsen and Ronan Buckberger being in the top 10 of scoring.
Yeah, well, definitely. And like we talked about this, like when we talked about the rookies as well, the rookie scoring leaders is just like they're not just getting secondary assists. They're right in there. They're power play quarterbacking. They have 7 goals each. These guys are right in the mix, playing very important roles for their teams. So that's very encouraging to see. And you mentioned it earlier, obviously, Ronan Buckberger is going to be gone for a little bit for Nipawin. So I look at a guy right below him, and we're not talking about young guys anymore, but Parker Layton, who's played such a good role in Larange now for the season. And now that Liam McInnes is out in Larange, and we'll talk about Liam McInnes as well, he could climb into this list very shortly, given his new spot and new role with Nipawin. But Parker Layton, I would assume that he's going to jump up this list as well next time we look at it, just given, he's probably going to get a little bit more responsibility in Larange now with McInnes out. So, that's another guy I'm keeping my eye on that list. But, Felix Allard is playing such a huge role in Estevan, leading the league in goals by a defenseman as well with 11. And then you see the Melfort guys, at the top of the list as well. It's 2 great players for that team. So it's a very good list. There's a lot of guys right under the list as well who are probably, they want to be in this top 10 as well, and they could push for it by the time we look at it again. So it's an exciting group of blue liners across the league.
Yeah, you mentioned Liam McInnes, and I think what stands out with Liam McInnes, and you said obviously he had 4 points yesterday, but he's only played 15 games this year. But he's above a point per game.
Yeah,
he's,
17,
6
games.
goals and 11 assists. And worth mentioning, you touched on it. Felix Allard, 11th, or first in the SJHL among defensemen in goals with 11. Second behind him is Chase Freetmore with 9. But yes, you are correct. The stats regarding the defensemen are very interesting because you touched on Parker Layton was 10th with 21, but then there's a couple of guys with 19. Tyler Teasdale, Ben Costantino, then Liam McInnes is only 13th. And then a young blue liner, and then a couple of young blue liners have really stood out as well below that list. Austin Oshovy and Kindersley, Landon Pappas and Nipwin. He might rack up some more points, especially with Ronan Buckberger being away for the next couple of weeks. He could have a bigger opportunity. And even Carter Hines with the Notre Dame Hounds, he's quietly had a goal and 15 assists. So the scoring among defensemen is intriguing after Noah Houle, because Noah Houle has obviously gone off to such a...
I mean, he's having a good year. 36 points.
Yeah, 36 points in 27 games. Fun fact, that's pretty good.
Pretty good.
That is pretty good. So,
there's
your defenseman scoring.
There we go. Now, I guess it's the time of the show, Jer, that you mentioned earlier. I planned the show today.
You did. And I appreciate you did, because I was in Melfort last night for a hockey game to call it. So I appreciate you being a good teammate.
Yeah, absolutely. And because of that, I'm going to actually tell you to sit back.
Perfect.
I'm going to take over the interviews portion of this show.
I appreciate that.
So hang out.
Okay.
Now, obviously on SJHL Insider, we like to go around the league and talk to broadcasters or media members from those markets to get their inside scoop on the teams that they either are play-by-play voices for, they cover, et cetera, et cetera. One team that we haven't talked about or talked to anyone about in a while now on this show specifically, they wear black and gold, Jeromy. And that is the Estevan Bruins. So we're going to go live. Is our guest ready, guys? Yeah? Guest ready? Okay, perfect. We're going to go live now to the guy who does broadcasts for the Estevan Bruins, Jeromy Corrigan. Jeromy, so happy that you're joining us for the show today. How's it going, man? Thanks for joining us today.
You know what? That was a great break. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I hope you got a breather.
I did. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm so happy that you're here because we have a lot to talk about with the Estevan Bruins.
Yes, there is.
Now, obviously, let's get it started with last night's game. I mean, you just said you got back late last night because there was a game in Melfort and 4-0 loss for the Bruins. So I don't know. Give us a synopsis from that game.
Well, first and foremost, what a surprise to have the honor and privilege of being a guest on this great program. A recap of last night's game. Okay. It was a very quick first period. Shots on goal after 20 minutes, just 7-6 in favor of Melfort. It was a very quick hockey game in general, but the one thing the Melfort Mustangs did a really good job of was clog up the neutral zone, and the Bruins really couldn't get much going. When it comes to any offense. They did end up outshooting the Melfort Mustangs by a mark of 27-24, but the quality of the shots, quite frankly, they just weren't there. And they had a tough time generating anything. Melfort was very hard on the forecheck. Talking to Jason Tatarnic post-game, he said, Melfort was very aggressive, hard on the forecheck, finished every check, and they made life very difficult for the Bruins, and they couldn't really generate much. So I think it was a disappointing performance for Jason Tatarnic and his team, and one that I know, talking to him again on the postgame show, he was hopeful that they learned something from, and they can obviously learn something and transition to a better effort in their next game on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we looked at the defensive stat leaders just a few moments ago on the show, Jeromy. I'm not sure if you were watching, but we really broke down the top 10 defensive stat leaders.
Yeah.
And Felix Allard is right in the middle of that. He's leading the league in goals by a defenseman. How big of an impact does this guy have on this team? And I look at some of the other stats from the blue liners on that team. I think there's a few guys that maybe haven't put up the numbers that maybe some of us were maybe expecting before the season started. But how big has Felix Allard been for this Bruins team?
I mean, he leads the SJHL in goals amongst defensemen, so it's pretty good. But you know what's interesting about that is even, he's the reigning Super U defenseman of the week. And I actually asked Jason Tatarnic about Felix Allard during the pregame show last night, and he even said, yes, he has been phenomenal for the Estevan Bruins, but he thinks he can be even better for them, which is crazy to think about because he's been very good for them. Obviously, he's kind of quarterbacking the power play. He's out there in the important situations. He plays a lot of minutes for them. A huge acquisition for the Bruins in the offseason. And obviously, he's the leader. He's one of the leaders on the blue line, him and Blake Heward. So he's playing a lot of minutes, maybe a bit more than Jason Tatarnic would like. But he's playing a lot of minutes. He's playing in all types of situations. And when the Bruins are playing to their capability, more times than not, Felix Allard is one of the guys leading the way.
Yeah, so we've talked lots of times about how Jason Tatarnic, head coach GM now there for several years, likes to get a lot of his business done in terms of the roster construction a little earlier on in the year, more than some other coaches do. And we've seen them add Zach Burfoot, Turner McMillan. We've seen them add guys like Ben Wright, Carson Dick, Zach Burns. They've already done a lot of tinkering. Do you anticipate that maybe given where they're at in the standings right now, 24, 25 games into the season, there's more on the way for this roster, or how do you kind of view how the roster is currently?
That's a good question. I think when it comes to their forward group, I think when their forward group is healthy, I don't know how many teams in the league can boast about the talent level of their forward group 1 through 12. If they made any addition, I would guess it would maybe be on the blue line, but that's just me guessing. Maybe to alleviate some minutes, maybe for Felix Allard and Blake Heward, who play a lot for Jason Tatarnic. Obviously, right now, it's a little bit interesting with the Bruins because they do have the 3 goaltenders. Talking to Jason prior to the game yesterday, sounds like all 3 are going to remain with the Bruins and kind of go with a 3 goalie rotation, as of course they acquired Eric Kale just a couple of weeks ago. But if I had to guess, I think first off, I think if you're a coach at this level of hockey, you're always looking to try and improve your hockey club in some sort of way, whether it be for this season or next season. But if I was a betting man, I would bet that they would, if they're going to make an addition prior to the January 10th trade deadline, I would guess maybe it would be a defenseman, but that's just me guessing.
That's fair enough. Now, you mentioned the 3 goalie system. I don't believe Eric Kale has actually dressed yet for the...
He's dressed. He
hasn't played. Okay, thank you. But you look at Cam Herdlicka, obviously last year, we talked about him almost weekly, pretty much weekly, just in terms of his value to the Bruins last year. Jackson Miller's taking a step as an older player this year as the backup goaltender, and then they bring in Kale, of course. But, the numbers for Cam, I'm going to specifically talk about Cam Herdlicka here. The numbers probably aren't what he would want them to be at this point, given where he was last year. In terms of he's got an .889 save percentage, 383 goals against, and last year he was, I think, sub 3 by the end of the year goals against, and he had a really solid save percentage. So what would you say about the goalie grades, I guess, this year in terms of can Cam get what he had back last year, I guess, is where I'm going with the end of this question.
Well, I'll say this. Obviously, Cam was hurt for quite a bit of time this season. That's going to obviously hinder some of your play, especially getting back into the lineup. What I would say is last night against the Melfort Mustangs, the score says 4-0. And it was 3 goals with an empty net goal. So 3 goals against on Cam Hrdlicka. I mean, none of the goals he had any chance on. One was a tip in from the point. One was a turnover into the slot, which allowed Zach Summers to walk right into the slot with a clear opportunity. And the other was a backdoor pass. Sometimes the numbers don't tell the tale, but like you said, I think Cam would admit that his game hasn't been as strong as it was last year, but there's definitely still been flashes of how good Cam Hrdlicka can and is when he is playing his game. I even look at the third period against the Kindersley Clippers last Saturday, and even though Bruins were down 5-2, he made a couple of 10-bell saves to keep it 5-2 and allow his team to at least get to within 1. And it was similar last night. He made a couple of big stops that kept the game 0-0, and then obviously the Bruins couldn't generate much. I always say, yes, you can look at the goaltending and you could say, wow, he led in 3 last night. But here's the thing. You're not going to win a game not scoring a goal. So you can't really blame the goalie for allowing 3 goals. So I think he is trending in a better direction, though, if he plays like he did last night, for sure.
That's good to hear. Great kid, too, honestly.
Outstanding.
One thing that I always notice when I look at the SJHL standings, and Jeromy, the TikTok that we put out, I'm going to say you put it out, but the SJHL put out about looking at the standings every day. And,
yes, it was me.
It's very accurate. But when I do look at the standings, one thing that I notice in the stats portion of the page is that the Bruins are the most disciplined team in the league by a large margin. Almost 100 penalty minutes between them and the next team to them. They have 100 penalty minutes less. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that as something that the Bruins can kind of hang their hat on, I guess, this year? Because we've seen in years past, the Bruins they have some of the higher penalty minute totals in years past. So is this something that they're proud of? Do they talk about this? Is this being talked about by the team?
I mean, I don't know if they talk about it too much, but I mean, you want to be disciplined, right?
Yeah.
You can't be given, especially some of the better teams in the league, many power play opportunities. Like a team like Melfort last night, they only gave them 3 opportunities. They still found the back of the net on 1. And that, I think for the Bruins, I think you don't want, obviously, no team wants to give up lots of power plays. And to come playoff time, that's you want to be a very disciplined hockey club. The one thing I would say that probably helps them in that regard is when they are moving their feet, they are a very quick hockey team. And as a result, you won't see much of the stick infraction penalties. You won't see much of the hooking. You won't see much of the tripping, slashing, etc. So when they're moving their feet, I think that allows them to not have to worry about potentially getting into trouble and taking penalties. But yeah, you're right. It's a positive for sure, and especially since the team has also turned around their power play. So if they're getting the power play chances and they're taking advantage, that's great. You just want to, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're not taking penalties and, giving some of these top teams with top power plays too many chances to score with an extra man. Yeah,
for sure. And as of today, as of this recording, the Bruins sit 5th in the SJHL in power play percentage. So they are performing well on that side.
Well, and it was tied for 3rd going into last night. And obviously they didn't find the back of the net on the power play. Melfort, who they were tied with, scored a power play goal. As a result, their percentage goes up.
There you go. That's going to happen. Now, we sit here today. It's December 7th. We're about a month away from the trade deadline. We talked about the moves. We don't need to worry about that right now. But the Bruins sit at 11, 12, 0-2. 4-6 in their last 10. Lost their last 2 games. I guess at this point, as they sit today, technically out of a playoff spot, they're tied for 8th, but they have a lower winning percentage, I guess. So they're sitting below Weyburn at the moment. Is there a level of concern with the team at the moment? Because there were expectations on this Bruins team coming into the year. I don't think anyone there would tell you that they haven't met their expectations yet. What is your assessment, I guess, at December 7th on this team?
I think there's frustration. I think that's probably it, because you've seen flashes of the capabilities of what this team can be. How many teams in the SJHL can say they've gone into Melfort and win on the road? They've gone into Humboldt, won on the road. They've gone into Battleford and won on the road. Not many teams in the SJHL can say that. Those are 3 of the tougher buildings in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League to do that. The potential is there. It's just piecing it all together. I'm sure the coaching staff would have hoped it would have been pieced together sooner, and it's still up and down, but it's that battle with consistency right now for the Bruins. And I mean, a lot of teams are battling with that right now in the SJHL standings. I think one thing, though, that I will say that will probably, if you're a Bruins fan and you are watching, here's something as a positive for you. Yes, they are currently, obviously, this weekend, they're going to be playing 2 road games against the Nipawin Hawks. Obviously, huge games in the SJHL standings. But as I pull it up on my laptop, next week, their last 2 games before Christmas, you are taking on 2 teams that are below you in the standings. The Yorkton Terriers, who they are seeing for the first time this season at Affinity Place. And then the Notre Dame Hounds, playing a neutral site game in Mydale, which, by the way, will be a great little rink to watch a hockey game in. But the thing that really stands out for me, though, is when you look at January and February, a lot of home games. A lot of home games for the Bruins. And while they are a game below 500 at home this year, there's a lot of home games against teams that are kind of around you in the standings, and also some good teams, too. A pair of games against Melfort, but a team you've beaten. Pair of games against Humboldt, a team you've beaten. But in the future, I also look at February, and February is a really interesting month because it pretty much is all home games plus 3 road games in Yorkton. How often do you see that?
Yeah,
you play 3
month.
road games against 1 team in their barn, and then 1 other road game in Melfort where you have won this season. Other than that, it's all at Affinity Place. So if you can build some momentum, you can get healthy, I think January and February is a really good chance and opportunity for the Bruins, even though they've gotten off to such a, I think, underwhelming start, which is probably the best way of putting it, will be a good way for them to turn it around. But they got 4 big games here to close out December. And, I think if you're the coaching staff, you're looking at those 4 games and you're probably saying, if we can go 3-1, we're probably pretty happy.
Absolutely. Now that was going to be my last question, is just going to have a look ahead at the last bit of December and then into the future. So I don't know what you were doing before the interview, Jeromy, but I know you're a busy guy, so I'm going to let you go. But thank you so much for joining us today and being our surprise guest. And everyone's going to really love the fact that you were able to jump in. I know you're busy. It's really hard to lock you down. That's why it's been, what is it, almost a year and a half now since we've been able to get you as a guest on this show. So again, thank you so much for joining us today.
You know what? It was a surprise, all right. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. And you know what? As we come back into the studio now, Jeromy, what did you take away from that interview with Jeromy Corrigan?
Best guest we've had all year.
It was a good guest, yeah.
Best guest we've had all year.
Video quality.
Yeah. Oh, and 100% best video quality all year.
Yeah. And the chemistry of the interview is almost like we were in the same room, I thought.
Almost. Yeah. Though, I'll say this. It's pretty funny, though, that you did the interview and you ask high quality questions like that. Yet whenever we have any other guest, you don't want to ask any questions.
I don't want to, make it confusing, I don't want to make them, I don't know.
Yeah, right. We have.
I don't want to upstage the host of the show either.
Right. I mean, we have another show where we have 3 people on.
That's true.
And they all ask questions.
That's true.
So I don't.
That's a good point.
I don't know if you could.
This would be a walk in the park.
Maybe in the new year. Maybe that could be your New Year's resolution.
You know what? I'll consider.
That'll be your New Year's resolution. To ask 1 question per interview.
Okay. You know what?
How about we'll put that in stone right now?
I'm fine.
Come the new year, 1 question per interview.
Sounds good.
You can just come on and be like, hey, so-and-so, it's Clark. Here's my 1 question.
Clark's rapid fire. Is that taken?
Yeah. Darn. Shoot. It's not sponsored, so we could probably just take it.
Yeah.
So
there is.
I don't know if Rory's put a trademark on it.
There is a chocolate bar out there called a Clark bar. We could get the sponsorship.
But the thing is, it doesn't have that good alliteration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clark's.
Good segments have good alliteration.
Clark's Corner. We'll figure it out. We'll workshop this.
For 1 question, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was a surprise. for sure. And I was not expecting that. So I'm still waiting for my segment off.
You nailed it, though. Do you want me to do the look ahead at the schedule?
No, let's do it. All right, let's talk about Friday and Saturday. Let's pull up the schedule. Let's start with Friday. How often do you see only 3 games on a Friday?
Very not often.
Wow, that was a great way of putting it. All right, so let's start. Estevan Nipawin at the Cage kicks off 2 games at the Cage. That schedule is not right, guys.
Oh, that's why it says CST, though.
That schedule is not right.
Weyburn versus Flin Flon.
It should say Weyburn and Flin Flon.
That's
it says
why it says
Larange versus
CST.
Yorkton. That's not right. Okay, well, that's okay. I'll just read them off.
Yeah, read them off.
Yeah, Estevan Nipawin. What's up with our graphics department? Took the week off, I guess.
They
I
must
don't
have,
know.
yeah.
I don't know. Estevan
We
and
told
Nipawin.
them we were giving them a segment off, like I told you we were giving them a segment off.
Yeah, you told the wrong people.
You told
the wrong people about the segment off. You gave the graphics people.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's okay. So it's Estevan Nipawin tomorrow night, Weyburn, Flin Flon, Kindersley, Melfort. And then Saturday's got 5 games. Let's try that graphic. Let's see.
try it.
Let's see if this one works. Saturday?
Yep.
That looks pretty good.
There we go. We got the CST
Hey,
on
that
the Flin
one's
Flon.
right.
We're good. We're good.
Good job,
We're
graphics
good.
team. Okay, Estevan Nipawin, Melfort visits Yorkton, Humboldt, Melville, Weyburn, Flin Flon, Larange, and Kindersley, and no games on Sunday. So only 8 games to choose from, Clark, when it comes to your game of the weekend. So as always, I'll let you lead off. What's your game of the weekend?
I'm going to go with Melville visiting Humboldt on Saturday night. It's the debut of Joel Mabin for the Melville Millionaires. We talked about it earlier in the show. Melville, we talked about how they're sitting right now in, is it 7th?
Melville?
7th spot in the standings right now. Like we talked about the games in hand. This is an important time for them to, win all these games, especially against a team above them in the standings. Not that Humboldt and them are in direct competition for 6th place by any stretch, but it never hurts to beat a team above you in the standings regardless.
Confidence booster.
Confidence booster, absolutely. And with Humboldt, like we talked about them earlier, coming off that November 5-5 in their last 10. I can't remember if they played a couple extra games in November, or is 5-5 their November. I can't remember if it was if they're 5-6 or something like that.
No, I think it was 6-5.
6-5. So maybe you're catching Humboldt at a decent time right now if you're Melville, and you can go in there and maybe upset them a little bit. But that's the game I'm looking forward to, because I think there's a couple implications in that one.
And to build off that, if Humboldt can win, they will move into a tie with the Balfords North Stars for 2nd place in the SJHL standings, with everyone's favorite term, games in hand.
Games in hand.
Game in hand, just one.
Just one.
Because Battlefords has the week off.
Yeah.
Which they deserve, because they had played the most games in the SJHL going into this week. That's a really good pick for game of the weekend.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go with.
There are some other ones I'm really.
You know what?
forward to.
Okay, this is the one I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with a little. I don't think it's off the board, but I'm gonna go Kindersley and Melfort Friday night, and both teams have won 3 games in a row.
Yes.
Kindersley had such a fantastic week last week. They beat Notre Dame, they beat Melville, they beat Estevan, all at home. However, after a week where they lost the 2 games to Larange. That's a huge week. What I want to see from the Kindersley Clippers, because I think Rory talked about it on the show. I don't know, was that this week? Yeah, it was this week. Just how they are one of the most fascinating stories in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League this season. There's so many, I'll say this. You didn't go to broadcasting school, but as somebody who did, a lot of people that get into broadcasting, it's not the sports, it's not the news, it's the storytelling. And the stories that are within the game or the new or the news, it doesn't matter. It's the stories, your storytelling.
Yeah.
And there's just, Rory said it best, there are just so many great storylines with this Kindersley Clippers team. They haven't been in the playoffs in 5 or 6 years. They got 3 sets of brothers on the team, and they have been on just such a roller coaster ride this year. 1 week, they have a phenomenal week. The next week they lose all their games. The next week they win all their games. It's really fun to watch. It's fun to watch, and I'm sure Clippers fans, you just want to kind of, okay, can we just have it be consistent because it's too much on the old ticker.
Yeah.
But it's so fun to watch. But now they're back on the road, and they're going to take on the Melfort Mustangs, who they get Zach Summers back last weekend against the Notre Dame Hounds. He plays outstanding. He was outstanding last night or Wednesday night against the Estevan Bruins, and they were missing a bunch of players. We'll see if they're back in the lineup on Friday against Kindersley. But, I think it's a big weekend for Kindersley because rewind 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, SJHL Showcase. That week, Clippers played 5 games in 6 nights.
Yeah.
They got 7 out of a possible 10 points. I guarantee any team in the SJHL would take that in a heartbeat. 7 points out of 10 games.
Yep.
They have so much positive momentum, and then they go home. And they drop 2 games in a row to L'Orange, a team below them in the standings. But then last week, they win all 3 games at home. And I think for Kindersley and that team, you don't want to have a similar weekend to what you did 2 weekends ago and lose both games, because then you're kind of just back to where you started from, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it's a big weekend for them as they visit the Melfort Mustangs, and then on Saturday they visit the L'Orange Ice Wolves, and that should be a great matchup too. But I think the Kindersley Melfort matchup intrigues me because obviously Melfort's also trying to catch Humboldt and Battlefords, and for Kindersley obviously they've gained some momentum, and they're trying to just give a little bit of separation from those teams in 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Yeah.
And I think that's, as a result, it's going to be a big weekend for them. And I don't know. It just always seems like Melfort and Kindersley, they play good games. Kindersley was the team that handed Melfort their first loss of the season when Melfort was 7-0. So
yeah, there you go. And one thing that always, you talk about storylines and everything too.
Yeah.
12, 11, 2-2 on the season, right? The winning record by percentage perspectives. Sure. Minus 14 in goal differential, and they've given up, the 4th most goals in the league. They're 6th in the league. So it's such a interesting balance of goals for, goals against, record, all those things.
You know what? To comment on that, I would say a lot of that though is their start to the year.
Sure.
They had won the toughest schedules. I think Nugsy said it was Kindersley and Notre Dame who probably had the toughest schedules to start the year in the first month and a half of the season. And as a result, since it's leveled out, since they got more home games and the schedule has kind of been more balanced a little bit, that's where you've seen that improvement.
Yeah.
And, I was talking to some Clipper fans in attendance in last Saturday's game against Estevan, and they were saying the one thing we've seen this year with Kindersley is from the beginning of the year to where they were December 2nd, which was Saturday, you just seen a slow growth in the team getting better. The goaltending's been better. The defense has been better. The power play has been quietly very good. I mean, there's been a couple of games this year where they've scored 4 power play goals. The number 1 line's been outstanding, but you're starting to see a slow, steady improvement.
Yeah.
And if they can continue to do that, they're going to return to the playoffs, but they're also going to give somebody fits in the first round.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I think there's maybe an argument there that first line, you talk about how good their first line had been. Maybe an argument for one of the top lines in the league so far this
100%.
season. They're all a point per game. Keenan Ingram has been, I'm going to say, like a revelation for that team. He's been such a perfect fit. I think he's been able to help make Logan Linklater better. I think Tylen Hilbig's gotten better. That first line.
And they're a fun line.
That is a fun line. A couple of giants, and Logan Linklater's a skitter bug out there.
Well,
yeah.
Size.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a fun line. But yeah, I'd say, Kindersley and Melfort's probably my game.
That's a good one.
Of the weekend. But I do think there's a lot of intriguing matchups for sure. I mean, one of us easily could have said Estevan Nipawin.
Oh,
like that. I mean,
yeah.
Even
Weyburn Flin Flon, I think, has a lot.
Well, it's got a lot for Weyburn.
Yeah, for Weyburn, really needs that one.
Weyburn, it'll be tough to, if you go up there and obviously, if you can't find a way to get some points up at the Whit, I mean, the Whitney Forum is obviously so tough to play in. you got to try and find a way to get some points.
Yeah, I think so.
Just because you're
It's a
playing
big one
3
for them.
games in 4 nights, and after the performance they had in Nipawin, I'm sure Cody Mapes and company will have the team pretty motivated for Friday night. And it's a big weekend. Obviously, I mean, Esven and Weyburn are, like you said, they're tied for 8th.
Yeah, it's a
8th
big
and final
weekend.
playoff spot. So, I mean, points are at a premium right now in the SJHL standings. And, I mean, with about, 9 days until the holiday break across the league.
Yeah.
All these games are very important. And I think the final point I kind of want to make before we wrap up is I want to give a lot of kudos to all the coaches and the coaching staffs of these teams, because I think with the players, it can be on December 7th today.
Mm-hmm.
It could be pretty easy to look ahead to Christmas.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
kind of be like, oh, just a couple more weeks until I can go home, see family. It's been a couple of months since I've been back home, type thing.
Yeah.
To keep the teams motivated, it's going to be on the coaches, obviously, these next couple of weeks, and it's a tall task because, like I said, Christmas is just around.
And they are teenagers, so most of them.
And most of them are teenagers.
Yeah.
That is correct, Clark.
Yeah.
All right. Of course, if you want to stay up to date with everything in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League this year, be sure to follow us across all the social media platforms. Like us on Facebook, follow us on X. Formerly known as Twitter. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got over 1,100 subscribers now on the YouTube channel, which is great to see. That's where you're going to find all the highlights, SJHL shows, features, you name it, on our YouTube channel. And subscribing's free, okay? It's free.
And easy.
It is. But all you got to do, sign in with your Gmail. You're signed in. You click subscribe. That's it. It's as easy as that. So subscribe to the YouTube channel today. And, of course, a big shout-out and a big thank you to all of our great sponsors. Of course, we have to start with UPL. They're our presenting sponsor here at SJHL Insider, SJHL Weekly, all of our shows. Thank you so much, UPL, for your support. And a big shout-out to all of our other great sponsors, Bourgault, Cantera Seeds, Capital Automall, Chevrolet, Great Western, Nutrien, RBC, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Sask Lotteries, Tourism Saskatchewan, UPL, Sask Energy, SGEU, SGI. Thanks so much for your support. Without your support, this show would not be possible. And I guess in conclusion, we have one more show of SJHL Weekly next week on Monday before the holiday break. We have one more show of SJHL Insider next week before the holiday break. And then a couple of weeks off from SJHL programming. And then we will return in 2024. And also, of course, and I might catch the guys in the back off guard. I don't know if they can pull it up in time, but of course, we also need to talk about quickly. The SJHL Game of the Month returns on SaskTel. First game in 8 days' time, Clark. 8 days.
8 days.
Don't have to wait long.
Yeah.
December 15th in Kindersley, the Battleford's North Stars, the Kindersley Clippers. Final weekend before the SJHL season. Christmas holiday break, sorry.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a great matchup.
Yeah, it should be.
And you know what? I always say with those two teams, that's one of the more underrated rivalries in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. And I don't think that rivalry has hit its animosity in a while, just because, quite frankly, it has been a bit of a one-sided rivalry because Battleford's has been so good since Braden Klamosko took over in North Battleford. But the way Kindersley's playing right now, it should be an interesting matchup.
Yeah,
and a lot of fun.
yeah.
There's the schedule right there.
Rivalries are cyclical, and they come and they go, but this one has been around for a long time. So I don't think it's ever fully gone away, like you said. And it's going to be, the bright lights of the Game of the Month, and I think it should be a lot of fun for everybody involved.
It's me, Rory, and Noogsy.
There you go.
Essentially the crew of SJHL Weekly,
Hey.
bringing you the on-camera stuff
Yeah.
on the SJHL game.
Should be a great time.
Of the month. So it should be a lot of fun. Come say hi if you're in the area. Come down to the West Central Event Center. Check out the game. And, if not, you can tune in on SaskTel. It's going to be a lot of fun. Clark, final thoughts before we go?
It's going to be another great weekend, so I'm looking forward to a lot going on the ice across the province this weekend. Should be a fun one.
And
A
hopefully
quieter weekend, but that just means you can focus on more games at a time.
and hopefully no ice on the highways.
Yes. Keep the ice in the rinks.
Keep the ice in the rinks. From Clark Munroe. Great. Quote it.
Thank you.
Click it.
Yeah, put it on Instagram.
Put it on a banner
Yeah.
and raise it to the rafters.
Sure.
All right.
Make that happen, Kyle. Kyle, I know Kyle's listening. Keep the ice in the rinks. Clark Munroe. Yeah.
Love it. Hang it from the banner.
Let's go.
Hang it with a banner from the IKS studios.
Oh, just in here?
Yeah, sure.
I thought you were saying each rink across the province.
No,
Okay.
that's a bad idea.
You're talking about it in here.
Yeah.
Well, that could work too. Could use some sprucing up there.
Anyways,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining us today on SJHL's Insider. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that like button. But 8 games this weekend, a quieter weekend in the SJHL. Get out to your local rink, support your local team. If not, of course, you can tune in to all 8 games on Flow Hockey. For Clark Munroe, my name is Jeromy Corrigan. This has been another episode of SJHL Insider across the SJHL, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and enjoy the games this weekend, everyone.